morning she stepped off that train, the cold wind forgot how to blow. That's how I remember it. Not the timetable, not the ink the depot man stamped, but the hush that rolled over Pine Rest when iron and steam came climbing out of the basin. A hush like the land took one long breath and couldn't decide whether to keep living without her or start again with her in it. Name's Thomas Callaway. Winter of '84, Montana Territory. I had 40-odd head tucked below a ravine in a house that sounded lonelier than a hymn after the congregation goes home. A bronc left a scar along my ribs. Folks left another you can't see. I wasn't a proper praying man. Out here a man talks to wind more than to God. Still, December nights crawl early, and I'd sit by the stove, hat on my knee, asking whatever listens in cold country. Send me someone who knows quiet, someone not afraid of work or weather, someone who'd rather build than break. Then came the letters. A notice at the Mercantile. Mail order arrangements. Respectable. No nonsense. I wrote like a man building a corral in the dark. Slow. Measuring every word. I promised nothing I couldn't hold. Warmth. Food. Freedom to choose. I asked for 3 months under the same roof. Separate rooms until trust found its feet. The reply carried a faint smell of soap and city smoke. Naomi Lawson, Philadelphia. Her words were clean. They didn't bend into pretty. She knew work. She knew cold. She asked if the sky truly opened wide enough to swallow hurt. I told her it did. Sometimes. On the right mornings, I made preparations with the stubborn tenderness a man hides from his own reflection. Fixed the draft in the eaves. Sanded the chair that always splintered my right hand. Bought 2 extra mugs, though coffee tastes the same out of one. Wrapped a small silver hair comb in brown paper. Oiled my Winchester. Not for show. Wolves had been working the draws. The week before Christmas, the basin wore a crust of old snow and the kind of sky that bruises toward evening. Cold carried a sound like glass. I rode fence, checked feed, counted the heads I loved more than I admitted. Keep your feet, girls, I told them. Talking to cattle is a lonesome man's habit. It keeps a person human. Nights, I read her letters the way a man reads maps when he ain't sure what country he's already in. She wrote about soot, about mothers gone early and fathers gone missing, about a seamstress room where winter lived in the bones. One sentence stuck under my ribs. I want to belong without disappearing. I pressed my palm to the table and listened to the house answer. The morning the train came, dawn arrived, pale and undecided. I saddled Murphy and let him pick his way toward town. Steam lay over the creek like a tired ghost. From the depot I heard the iron rhythm, clank, breathe, clank like a big animal finding its legs. I wanted to be brave. Truth is, I felt young and foolish, older than stone, and grateful all at once. I had the silver comb inside my coat. A man can pull a breech calf in sleet and not shake, but waiting to meet the person who might be his last chance at home. That's a different cold entirely. The engine sighed. Cars clicked to a stop like a prayer figuring where to end. Doors opened. Salesmen, families, drifters. Then there she was. Gloved hands, a small valise, a face that looked like it had learned to keep a secret and finally found someone safe enough to tell. She searched until her eyes found mine. Didn't smile first, didn't flinch, just breathed like the continent had been tight in her chest and let out a fraction of it. I tipped my hat. "Miss Lawson," I managed. "Welcome to Pine Rest." She nodded. "Mr. Callaway." City edges, winter patience. We stood close enough to feel the same air and far enough to be decent. Snow clung to the brim of her bonnet and made small constellations I felt foolish for noticing. I took one bag. She kept the other. We walked. Not fast, not slow. Just two people measuring the space beside each other, seeing how the day fit us both. I keep thinking about that first breath after the engine quieted, how the world sounded almost gentle. Maybe that's all a man asks at the end, one morning where the land and his heart agree to stop fighting. If you've ever waited on a platform with more fear than luggage, you'll understand. They say a man remembers the first winter he shares a roof more than any summer that comes after. I reckon that's true. When Naomi and I rode back from the depot, the trail cut through fields, half asleep under snow. Murphy's hooves crunched soft, like walking on old glass. She didn't speak much, neither did I. Words felt like firewood. You didn't waste them, lest the night was cold enough. The cabin sat where the ridge dipped east, a single chimney holding on to a thin thread of smoke. I'd patched what I could, hung a strip of dried sage above the door, for luck or maybe memory. When she stepped inside, I saw her eyes take in the space. Plain boards, iron stove, one table, two chairs, a quilt I traded from a widow up north. "It's honest," she said finally, her voice soft but not fragile, like someone who learned to sew her own quiet. I told her she could have the room facing the east field. Morning light hit that window first, and I figured someone who lived in soot might want to wake to gold. She smiled once, barely there, and said she'd make supper if I brought wood. That sounded like home more than any prayer I'd ever heard. We settled into a rhythm that didn't need talking. She cooked, I worked, and at dusk we'd sit by the fire with coffee gone bitter. I'd read a page from her letters again, pretending to study the handwriting when all I wanted was the sound of her turning paper. One night, she asked about my scar, the one cutting across my ribs. I told her about the bronc that threw me down in the coulee, about how the doctor said I was lucky to live. She looked at the stove, the way women do when they see something a man won't say outright. "Sometimes," she whispered, "God leaves a mark so you won't forget what didn't kill you." She was right. I didn't forget. Not the pain, not her voice. A week passed before Christmas found its way to our door. Snow stacked high, wind humming low. I brought in a small pine and set it by the window. She wrapped strips of red cloth around it. No ornaments, no ribbons, just color against all that white. That night, she handed me a gift, a wool scarf, thick and hand-stitched. "So you don't freeze when you check the herd," she said. I didn't know what to do with kindness that steady. I gave her the silver hair comb, wrapped clumsy in brown paper. She opened it, blinked twice, then ran her thumb along the teeth like she was learning the shape of trust. We didn't speak after that, just sat close, the fire painting her face in amber. The cabin didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive, breathing slow beside us. A few days later, the storm came down hard. Sky turned mean, cattle bawling through the ravine. I saddled Murphy, told her I'd be back by nightfall. She said nothing, just tied the scarf tight around my neck. "Don't let the wind steal you," she murmured. Out there, snow hit like sandpaper. I could barely see the herd, huddled by the frozen creek. While I worked to drive them back toward shelter, I heard another sound, a single rifle crack cutting through the wind, then another. Wolves. I turned, heart hammering, and saw her, Naomi, on my second horse, rifle steady, coat whipping wild. She'd followed me. Damn brave, or damn foolish, I couldn't tell which. But she was there, and together we fought the dark back, till it broke apart. When we finally drove the herd inside, she slid off the horse, trembling, but unbroken. You said we'd face the cold together, she gasped, and I swear I'd never loved another soul more than in that breath. We stood in silence, steam rising from our coats, both shaking from more than cold. I wanted to speak, but words were too small. I just reached out, took her hand, and felt the pulse that told me everything I needed to know. Later that night, after the storm eased, I sat by the fire, watching her mend a tear in her coat. The scarf she'd given me hung near the stove to dry. I realized that for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting on Christmas. I was living it. If you've ever felt a hand steady yours in the dark, you'll understand. Some winters don't let you forget what you came from. They drag your ghosts across the snow till you have to face them, one by one. The storm passed, but it left the land hollowed and quiet. The creek froze solid, fences cracked under weight. I fixed what I could, mended posts with stiff hands. Naomi rode beside me some mornings, her hair tucked under that scarf I come to think of as luck itself. Days grew shorter, nights longer. Out here time doesn't pass, it circles back. I reckon that's why the past always finds you. It was a Friday when the letter came. I'd ridden into town for salt and nails. The postmaster handed it over like it might bite. The envelope bore an Eastern seal, Philadelphia again, written in a woman's hand I didn't know. Naomi took it by the stove that evening, broke the wax slow. I didn't ask, but I could read her shoulders. Whatever words lived in that letter, they weren't kind. Her eyes glazed over, drifted far past the walls, all the way back to some place she'd sworn off. She folded the paper once, twice, neat as a prayer, and set it in the fire. "He's gone," she said finally. "A brother, or what's left of him. Debt, drink, and winter." I didn't answer. Out here silence means respect. Still I felt the ache of it in my own bones. Loss recognizes loss. It's like looking into a mirror, fogged by the same storm. After that she moved different, quieter. I'd find her outside past sundown, eyes on the far ridge, like she could see a life that never got built. I knew that feeling too well. The one where every plan you ever had is buried under the snow, and you ain't sure whether to dig or let it stay. One night, the cold crept in early. We sat by the fire and she asked, "Do you ever think about leaving this place?" I laughed once. "Every man does, but the trick is not to." She smiled at that, a small, tired kind of smile. Maybe I could learn that trick. The fire popped. Outside, wind crawled along the roof. I told her about my own ghost then, about a woman named Clara who'd once worn a blue dress and waited for me till she couldn't anymore. About how the West took her patience the same way. It takes everything gentle, slow, without apology. Naomi didn't pity me. She just said, "Maybe the West doesn't take. Maybe it trades." I thought about that long after she'd gone to bed. Maybe she was right. Maybe every scar, every death, every storm, they ain't punishment. They're just the price we pay to keep standing under a sky this wide. Weeks passed. We fell back into rhythm. Feed, mending, coffee, small laughter over nothing. But there was something new between us, something tender and unspoken, like the hush before dawn. Then came the morning I found her standing at the barn door, watching the horizon with a look that could break stone. "Thomas," she said softly, "I've been thinking. When spring comes, maybe I'll go back east. Not for good, just to settle what's left there." My gut turned to dust. I wanted to ask her to stay, but a man like me knows that caging a free heart's worse than letting it go. So I said, "I'll hitch the wagon when you're ready." She turned then, came close enough for me to smell the faint rose soap she used sparingly. "You always say what a man should," she whispered, "not what he wants." And she was gone, out into the snow, feeding the chickens like she hadn't just cracked open my chest. That night, I didn't sleep. The wind moaned against the boards, and the house felt bigger than it ever had. I sat by the dying fire, her scarf draped across my knees, wondering if peace ever came to men who loved too careful. Sometimes the past doesn't come to haunt you. It comes to test if you've healed, if you've ever stood in the quiet, trying not to beg the night to stay. You'll understand. Spring came slow that year, as if the earth itself was scared to thaw. Snowmelt ran down the draw, carving veins through the pasture. The sky softened, and the cattle's hides began to shine again. Life moved, quiet and steady, like a man afraid to wake a sleeping heart. Naomi kept busy with her lists, her letters, her half-packed trunk by the door. I kept busy pretending I didn't see it. The morning she left was pale, the kind that don't promise much. She said she'd be back before summer, that she just needed to settle her brother's debts and say goodbye proper. I nodded like it was business, not the kind of parting that tears a man down from the inside out. She climbed onto the wagon, glove a hand brushing mine. "You'll keep the coffee warm?" she asked. "Always." Then the wheels turned, creaking through thawed mud, and the sound carried farther than I thought sound could go. For a few days I stayed busy, fixed the north fence, branded calves, talked to Murphy like he understood. Nights were longer again, not in hours but in weight. The house lost its echo, and the air turned flat. I tried to read her old letters, but the words felt like dust, too dry to swallow. So I took to the trail instead, riding out toward the ridge every evening. From up there, you can see the tracks of the old wagon road, and if you stare long enough, the mind plays tricks. It shows you movement where there's none. One evening, the wind shifted warm. Thunderclouds crouched low over the valley. I could smell rain on the air, and for a reason I can't name, I rode farther than I meant to, east, toward town. By the time I reached the bend near Miller's Creek, I saw her wagon, stuck deep in mud, horse down on one knee, harness twisted. She was there, sleeves rolled, mud up to her waist, trying to free the wheel. She looked up, startled. "Thomas? Seems like the West decided you weren't done with it," I said, trying not to smile too much. She laughed, short, breathless. "Or maybe you weren't." We worked till dark, levering the wheel, soothing the horse, and when it finally came loose, she leaned against the wagon, hair plastered from sweat and rain. "Guess I owe you," she said. I shook my head. "You don't owe me a thing. You just come home." There wasn't any kiss, not yet. Just a quiet nod between two people who'd already said more than mouths could handle. We rode back together under the storm. Rain hit the land hard. washing away what was left of winter. Lightning lit the prairie white as bone, and for a heartbeat, I thought maybe that's what forgiveness looks like. Light breaking open everything that used to hide. When we reached the cabin, she stopped on the porch, dripping and shaking. I thought I was done chasing ghosts, she said. Turns out home was the only thing I was running from. I set the lantern on the sill, then stopped running. Inside, the fire came to life again. We dried by it in silence, boots steaming, hearts catching up. She pulled out a folded deed from her bag, signed, sealed, both our names now printed in black. For the ranch, she whispered. For us. I can't rightly say what came over me, but I laughed. Real laughter, deep, rusted with years, the kind that hurts good. We didn't talk about marriage right then, but the way her hand rested on mine said enough. There are promises spoken loud, and there are the ones you live by. Later, when the rain eased, she stood at the doorway, looking out over the field. It smells like a beginning, she said. I came up beside her, still holding that scarf she'd given me long ago. Yeah, I murmured, and this time we start together. Sometimes the road home ain't miles at all. It's just finding the courage to open your own damn door. If you've ever watched someone walk back through the rain and call it forgiveness, you'll understand. Summer rolled and gentle that year like the land itself was sighing in relief. Grass came up high enough to hide the fence posts, and the sound of the creek carried clear down the valley. I swear, even the wind seemed softer, like it had finally run out of things to take. Naomi and I settled into a life that didn't need explaining. We worked side by side, she with her ledgers and notes, me with my boots sunk deep in dirt. The ranch grew steady. So did the quiet between us, the kind that don't ask for filling. Most mornings, I'd find her on the porch before sunrise, coffee in hand, watching the mist lift off the meadow. She said that's when the world feels cleanest, before folks wake up and remember what they've lost. I reckon she was right. Some nights, I'd wake to her humming soft under her breath, old hymns she said her mama used to sing. I never asked the words. Didn't need to. You could hear peace sitting inside 'em. One evening in late August, we rode the ridge together. The sky burned orange and silver, the kind of light that makes you forget the day's wait. She leaned over her saddle horn and said, "You ever think about what comes next?" I thought for a while before answering. Used to think about it every day. Now, I just think about this. She smiled, eyes glinting like creek water. Then I guess we made it. We didn't need any preacher's blessing or fancy paper to know it. But come the first chill of fall, we rode into town anyway. Two worn souls who'd been through enough winter to appreciate a warm word. We married under the cottonwoods behind the chapel. Just a few neighbors, a bit of wind, and a whole lot of sky. Afterward, we shared coffee with the pastor's wife, then rode home before the sun dipped low. She leaned her head on my shoulder the whole way, and I remember thinking, this is what a man prays for when he don't even believe anymore. Years passed. Fences needed mending. Seasons kept changing. Some nights, when she'd be reading by lamplight, I'd just sit quiet and watch her face in the glow. Every line, every shadow, was a story we'd already told. One Christmas Eve, maybe 10 years later, she set that same silver comb in my hand. "Keep it," she said, "for when you forget how young we once were." I laughed. I don't aim to forget. But time's a tricky horse. It don't stop for anyone. The winters came harder again, and one day she didn't wake, just slipped away soft as breath. I buried her on the hill overlooking the pasture. Wind stronger up there. Sometimes I still hear her humming, riding the breeze through the cottonwoods. Now it's just me, the herd, and a sky too big for one man, but I ain't bitter. I've seen what love looks like when it ain't rushing, when it's earned through blisters and quiet and forgiveness. Some evenings I sit by the fire, same chair, same scarf hanging by the door. I pour 2 cups of coffee out of habit, and I talk to her. Tell her the calves are fat, the roof still leaks, and the land keeps its promises. Then I listen, and I swear, sometimes the house still breathes with her in it. If you've ever loved someone enough to stay after the seasons turn, you'll understand. And maybe love ain't about holding on. It's about learning to let go gentle.